you ready for the incredible sound of classic rock? No? Good, because now it's time for Visiting the Village.
Hello and welcome to Visiting the Village. I'm Paul Kilduff-Taylor, and joining me once again is the forceful Ian Hardingham.
Hello, what a beautiful May 4th it is today.
Let's get out of this dungeon.
It's the top story.
ESL are launching a 24-hour general esports channel next month. Esports TV will be broadcast on streaming sites Twitch, Azubu, Hitbox, and Yahoo, but they're also planning to partner with traditional broadcasters in other countries. Is this the drop-in, drop-out generalist esports content you've always wanted?
It sounds like it. The question whether it can survive is the biggest question to me. I'm super excited to see this. I know I go on about it all the time, but the thing I want most is just to have a place on the internet I can just go, watch esports, whatever it is, get some new games going on, get some games I'm familiar with going on, and just not have to think at all and just put on a channel. So I think it's not hugely likely that it will necessarily succeed. Like, it's not a shoo-in or anything. It's probably sort of 30-40% that it'll even get through the first 18 months. But it is the product I want, so I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I am very dubious about this, actually. ESL, I think, are an interesting person, or rather interesting organization to attempt to do this. Their content is generally sort of very solid, particularly their StarCraft content. I just don't think they're the right organization to do a kind of cross esports thing. If they've mostly focused on sort of some specific games before, and they're kind of from within the existing milieu of sort of slightly bland esports organizations, I would say. So I have no confidence that this will work.
I mean, do you think that's really... I mean, none of those things sound particularly compelling to me about whether or not this is going to work. I think the first thing is that it's got to actually be an alright product. I think that it doesn't need anything flashy about it, but the idea that you log on and you're never more than, a few minutes away from some live action. I guess with it being 24/7, they've got to have a load of replays, and how many replays there are is going to be really important to me and how good it is. I don't really think it matters that they don't have the best casting. I think it's such a unique proposition that they'll be able to quite quickly see where the problems are. I mean, ESPN's quite bland. For me, the real question is whether they can do it in a cost-effective manner.
The problems for me are they're not going to have the best content across every esports, for one thing. That's a minor problem. A major problem is that I don't trust them to do content that isn't just, matches. So that's the major thing that the channel, I think, can offer, is a place for stuff between matches that is more coherent and more interesting. So they're not going to have the best matches to watch. They're not going to have stuff that is going to draw me there. So for me, there needs to be an advantage over just the rest of Twitch. And I'm not currently seeing one from what they've proposed.
If this idea takes off, they'll probably have the best matches relatively quickly, or certainly high-level matches relatively quickly. If this becomes very popular for at least a little while, the number of viewers that pro gaming matches tend to get tends to be like low six figures, like very low six figures, can get significantly beyond that for the really massive events. So we're not talking about a bar that's so high that you can't imagine a sort of a successful, well-marketed launch getting sort of 200,000 or 300,000 watchers of some of their best content, and then suddenly it's going to be a more attractive destination for more people. I think this whole scene is too much in flux to say that just because they're ESL, it's not going to succeed.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I've experienced some ESL stuff. I like some of the things they do. I really have enjoyed their StarCraft content. I just wanted to see something more ambitious than this as a way in. I just don't see the value add to me here. It's not like I struggle to find something I want to watch on Twitch at any given time. So it to me, that's not a problem that needs solving.
Right, but it really is for me. Like, I do log into Twitch probably once every couple of weeks, and invariably the only thing that anyone's watching is a League of Legends tournament or a Dota tournament, which I'm not particularly interested in watching. And then everything else is some weird stream of World of Tanks or something, which is sort of too minor for me. That it's just someone casting from their bedroom or something, and not really a major event. So I do have a problem like that. Like I'm always logging into Twitch and not finding something that I find interesting to watch.
Right, and the idea that this is going to supply that, to me, is not... I just don't see... I want to see them come out with something different. Like, so they've just announced that it is just them, and they're going to basically use their own content and put it into this format. To me, that's like the lowest possible way of doing this. There's nothing there that adds to what's there currently. In terms of... I'm not sure... If you're going to Twitch and you can't find something to watch, then you're not going to enjoy watching this channel, because it's just the existing stuff that's on there.
Well, are you including replays in that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's
because I'm not going to go on
easy.
Twitch and track down a particular game to watch from an esport that I'm not massively into. I'm just not going to do that. I'm way too casual for that. But if there's a replay showing on this one channel that I go to and it's halfway through, then I may well get onto that. Like, I really think there's a big disconnect between you and me about who this actually offered at, and you know what you're asking for. Well, I'm not even sure what you're asking for. I mean, maybe it's to suddenly emerge like a massive network that can unify all of the best casters and matches and stuff, and that's not going to happen first for me.
But I don't need that. I need original content to watch at different times. Like, I'm not going to watch, you know, the last international or whatever, because I didn't watch replays of that when it was available. I'm not interested in that. I'm not going to watch, you know, StarCraft content from 3 years ago, or even from 2 or 3 weeks ago, unless I'm sort of specifically seeking it out. So to me, replays are not something that I find hard to get access to if I want, and they're not something that I feel like I need on demand. In terms of, so we're talking about a casual audience here, which is, I think, what they're talking about. And that's interesting. So I would want to know how they're going to frame it for a casual audience. If this is a way to get into esports that I'm not currently into, that would be cool, but I'm not seeing anything to indicate how that would happen.
Well, all I can say is that I am one consumer, and just the fact it's on 24/7, it's a brand I've heard of, and I just have this feeling of consistency with it, means that I'm really attracted to it. And I have some weird tastes, but I definitely feel like there are other people like me when it comes to esports.
Conceptually, this is interesting, and I've been down on ESL because I just don't think they're right for this. But if they're going to make the changes that are going to make this good, then I'd be very excited to see it. I don't want to bash this. I'm kind of bashing this for rhetorical effect so that we have an interesting conversation more than anything else. I don't want to be the person that is kind of out there wanting this to fail. I definitely don't want this to fail. I want it to come out and do something really different that's going to take this forward and genuinely reach, you know, this new audience, bring some more people in. So I want to end this segment by saying, you know, I support this as a concept, but the pragmatic part of me is saying there's nothing yet to say this is going to work.
There's one thing with this that I don't want to happen. I don't want them to have like a couple of studio shows which are repeated all of the time.
Right.
I quite like watching studio shows live or at their original broadcast date. I hate, for some reason, watching replays of studio shows. So that's the thing I don't want to happen. I would much rather they be showing a match from a couple of weeks ago, something weird I hadn't watched, than showing their version of Pardon the Interruption 6 times a day, which some of these things do.
Yeah, that's true. That's a sort of standard new channel thing to do, which is concerning. But yeah, I mean, I'll watch this with interest. I'll watch your response to it with interest to see if it delivers exactly what you're after. But it is an intriguing one.
Yes, it is.
According to video game research site The Cutting Room Floor, there is a substantial difference between the European and other versions of the 3DS built-in game Street Pass Me Plaza. Apparently, if a player decides not to purchase any games in the North American or Japanese version, the sales bunny will look sad while depressing music is played in the background. In the European version, the bunny respects the player's decision and remains neutral. According to the site, this is due to a law in the UK that prevents companies from manipulating children into making in-app purchases. Is this honesty from Nintendo or an overabundance of legal caution?
Well, it sounds like it's a legal caution thing if they're only doing it in Europe. That sounds like a decent explanation of why they're doing this. I'm quite happy about that UK law. I think a bunny looking sad when you don't buy something, that's actually kind of across the line for me. And I'm hardly surprised. I mean, I know absolutely nothing about Japanese culture, or Japanese law, Japanese society, so I don't know what stuff's like over there. But I'm certainly not surprised that in America, they're perfectly happy for you to do stuff like this. But I'm kind of glad that that's not allowed in England.
Yeah, I'd be interested to get into the law on this a bit more. I'm not quite sure how you can frame, it says on the site, this is to reflect a law in the United Kingdom that involves children being pressured into purchasing digital content. I don't know what entails pressuring a child into purchasing something.
I mean, it could be an advertising standards-like system where it's kind of just based on complaints and sort of the point of view of the legislators, which, I mean, there's certainly place for stuff like that in something, you're right, that's as subjective as this.
I mean, they certainly advertise heavily to children. I'm sure you've seen what children's advertising is like now.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying.
So it's interesting, but this idea of like a character that makes you feel bad for not buying something, I think it's kind of over the line for adults, let alone children. I don't want that in my me plaza.
Yeah, so well, way to go, UK law people. This is good.
Defend the children. 9 minutes of footage from a beta version of Nintendo's next mobile game, Pokemon Go, has leaked. The game has an optional AR feature when capturing Pokemon, which superimposes the creature over a live video feed from the camera. The battle system is also substantially different and involves dropping off one of your pocket monsters at a specific location and going off to different things while it fights automatically on your behalf. Is it still Pokemon when you change the fighting mechanics this substantially?
Well, no, not really. Pokemon's got to be a tile-based RPG on the Game Boy 1, surely. So the reason we're talking about this is AR. Nintendo seem to be all in for AR when it comes to their non-first-party console games. So first we had whatever it was called, and now we've got Pokemon Go, which is super AR. So Nintendo are loving the AR.
Do you believe this rumor that this is to do with the NX and that the NX is a very AR-heavy platform?
Well, I mean, if I was at the blackjack table, bad mixed metaphors here, if I was gambling on this, I mean, you've got to pay that some serious attention. That's definitely a possibility. If they appear to be obsessed with it to me, and when Nintendo are obsessed with something, they tend to make hardware about it. So I'd kind of definitely put money on that. I'm sort of really terrified at what a console that's all about AR is like. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what that looks like. I mean, isn't that just a mobile phone?
Right, I know. And I'm yet to play an AR game that I think is particularly interesting. And that's one of the reasons for that is that I want to... Games for me are about creating a coherent reality that is not part of my immediate surroundings. It's not something that I don't feel like my surroundings are adding anything interesting to a potential game, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm like massively against AR. I think it's kind of just the worst combination of things. It's like you've got some real world constraints, but they make no particular coherent sense.
Yeah.
And where you are matters, how you're standing matters, where you're looking matters, all really boring things to matter. And in the fight between sort of virtual reality and AR, I'd much rather play VR, which is at least like one big coherent system.
Yeah.
But, on the other hand, I've seen how massive that Me thing was. And obviously, I guess kids like playing with AR stuff. I think, this might be a being old thing. I like that my interaction to be in the real world and not sort of always be this kind of gamey thing. Like I want to either be playing a game with someone or I want to be just in real life with someone. For instance, I really dislike pub quiz. I don't know if that's anything like the same thing. So it's just not for me, really.
Yeah, I mean, the AR things I can imagine being interesting are things like board games where you can perhaps see, units fighting or something like that. That could be interesting. But this sort of thing where it's, I'm just looking at this screenshot and there's a Pokemon, sort of in a nice environment there. And I just... to me, this is always going to be this kind of game light thing. I feel like casual games have been done really well on mobile already, and there's a kind of known paradigms for casual games, things that a lot of different people can get into. And I just don't see this as adding anything to the actual gameplay. It always seems to be predicated on the novelty of AR. And as we've both discussed, that novelty is not something that excites us as a novelty.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see how Nintendo's forays into non-first-party stuff goes. Not as interested as I am to see what the NX is going to be like. But these first two things are definitely not in my avenue.
For the last few months, people hoping to buy the most popular games on Amazon have found that they need a Prime subscription in order to buy directly from the company. Third-party sales are unaffected. Why is Amazon putting a barrier around its most popular items?
I found this story completely bizarre. I put this on our list of things to talk about, and I fully expected it to be taken down as a mistake, a few hours after being posted. But apparently this is actually true. If you want to buy GTA 5 or FIFA 16, you have to have a Prime subscription to do it. And I just find this completely bizarre.
So I'm trying to approach, why they might want to do this if they're Amazon. I guess it's because they're kind of going on the fact that people like buying things direct from them, presumably because of how quickly they can get stuff. Do they have better pricing on these big titles or something? I mean, because it seems to be like you're buying the right to just use Amazon as a service.
I mean, it's just the weird thing is that, sure, they can use it as a loss leader for their Prime membership. Let's say that's what they're doing, even though we don't know that. So they're offering sort of significant discounts, maybe even making absolutely no profit at all on these very popular items so they can get more and more people into Prime. And if you've ever tried to buy anything from Amazon, you know how much they desperately want you to subscribe to Prime.
Yeah.
But that's such a weird proposition to me. That's like, Amazon's supposed to be a thing that you can buy anything from all of the time. It's not supposed to be something that's moving towards exclusivity for Prime. I just find it really disconcerting. And the fact that you can buy stuff from other resellers doesn't make any particular difference to me. I mean, if they sell these things direct, they should allow you to buy it without having Prime. It just seems really, really weird.
This might be a case of bad data inference. So I'm sure Amazon have a lot of data that says they get the most revenue from Prime and from Prime users. And what may have happened is that they have interpreted that to mean that literally any possible way of getting someone to sign up for Prime, including their ridiculous and not just borderline, but actually abusive trial sign up for Prime, which is deliberately confusing and has confused many people that I know into doing something they don't want to do. That's the extent that they're willing to go. So with this, I think it might just be an overextension of that, where they're doing things that now almost make no sense in terms of the detriment to their regular business, just because Prime is so lucrative. That's got to be my only guess here.
Yeah, and the prospect of Prime, I understand Prime kind of most as a competitor to Netflix, even though, I guess, originally it was sort of solely about giving you fast delivery for free, and now they've just started adding more and more features to it. So it's kind of a bit like an internet subscription now.
Yeah,
it's something that they're trying to give you as many services as possible for a subscription, and in my experience, that doesn't tend to work. I might be wrong, but that doesn't tend to be a thing that really takes off. I think it's too broad and generalized, and certainly the idea that I would sign up to Prime so I could buy GTA 5, I just find that completely bizarre. Anyway, I've said bizarre enough. Amazon, I've heard some rumblings. There was a book that was published saying that Amazon's practices are absolutely terrible. I haven't actually read it. I haven't paid much attention. In general, I have a bit of brand loyalty to Amazon. It is really easy to use. The prices are good. I've had good experience with it. I really like the Kindle store, etc. Although Amazon, you need to Kindleize CJ Sherrer's work. I don't know why you haven't. So I'm just kind of like offended by this.
He slipped that one in there. That's a pretty pro move. Yeah, Amazon, I still, and I'm not exaggerating here, I still find Amazon a scary company. They do things that are very strange and unpredictable and very, very, very aggressive. And this kind of is one of those things. And to be honest, it's another situation where I think everything would be better if they had a viable competitor, but they really don't. You know, they really are this monolithic thing that has a lot of control over a couple of different marketplaces. And I think we're starting to see some of the negative sides of that. Sort of now they've realized that you don't have to always treat your customers well if you have that level of dominance. And I think this is part of that.
Yeah, retaining competition in this day and age is really hard because people just generally all flock to the same service once it becomes good enough and has all the skills to get people, and there's so many advantages of being on the biggest service. But it's so important that we do have competition. So I don't know how, maybe Google can try and rival Amazon. I don't know.
Sega are allowing their Mega Drive game collections on Steam to be modded, and they'll also be supporting these mods via the Steam Workshop. I believe all this has kicked off already. The favourite mod that I've seen so far is called Streets of Rage 2, but everyone makes that weird Tim Allen noise when they die, which is just literally what it says on the tin. What place do old games now hold within the pantheon?
Well, I wasn't expecting that question. Maybe I should have been. I was all ready to talk about modding console games.
Well, that's part of the question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the just modding, like, on the one hand, being able to mod a SNES game when I had a SNES would have been really cool. Modding's kind of less exciting nowadays. We've talked about it a lot. It's just, for whatever reason, mods just don't seem to be quite as exciting a thing as they were in their heyday. But I really like the idea of people hacking into these old ROMs and doing funny stuff. It's going to make some good vines, at least. I guess I don't really understand the question. What do you mean in the pantheon?
So where do we put old games now? Because Sega have obviously put a huge amount of effort into this release. They've just started to do new things, this mod support. They've got all this stuff where you have this virtual bedroom and so on. And I just don't know what... We're at a time now when old games really sort of are a known quantity in some ways in terms of how they can be re-released and resold. And I just wanted to know what you think about their context. Like, when someone makes a game, are they going to be planning for sort of 30 years in the future now when that game's going to come out as part of a weird collection? Or are these just driven by nostalgia? I still find it a little bit hard to contextualize what we're doing with old games.
I think that games will have much shorter shelf lives going forward. So, how easy it is and how much fun is it to play an old game, a game from different eras? In a lot of ways, it's actually easier and funner to play a SNES game than it is to play a PC game from the early noughties, despite being another decade older. For various reasons. And I always think that console games just tend to be a bit more polished in ways that matter 15 and 20 years in the future. They tend, because they're targeting one system, to be much easier to get working. Something about consoles, even modern day consoles. I think if you want to go and replay a multi-platform game from 2002, you should probably track it down on a console, weirdly enough. I don't know why I think that. Maybe that's completely wrong.
Yeah.
And I guess that continues. But, a lot of this is really nostalgia-based. And I don't know how strong the nostalgia of people who were 14 when they were playing PC games in 2003, I don't know how strong that will be in 15, 20 years. I just don't know. I mean, I tend to pretty much just look forward myself. I don't really enjoy playing old stuff. That's just a personal thing. So I don't really think about it very much.
I think there's a few different categories that are interesting. So, for example, at the Rezzed Vice after party, they had Bomberman and Smash Brothers Melee. And they are really good games to play in a sort of big party environment. Like Mass Bomberman on a big screen. It was, I believe, SNES Bomberman. That's a really good game, and there's nothing sort of out there now that can really rival that in terms of, as you say, sort of immediacy. And Smash Brothers Melee is sort of fairly sensibly regarded as being objectively better as a game than the subsequent editions of Smash. I think there's an actually good objective case for that in terms of depth and, the ability to control the characters and so on that you can make for that. So there's old games which are sort of better than things that exist now. And then there is stuff that people want to play for nostalgia. I tried playing Syndicate again a couple of weeks ago, and it's really hard to play now. The UI particularly is very cumbersome, and it's very slow as well, which is sort of something you don't necessarily expect. Like, just selecting a bunch of units and getting them to go somewhere is actually way
I think it
harder
probably
than it should be.
is the user interface thing. The thing I was thinking about consoles, it's probably because you've got so much more of an understandable, long-running language for UI on a console.
Yeah.
Trying to remember what people thought it was okay to do in a strategy game on the PC in the late 90s,
Right.
not very easy.
Yes. Yeah, it's extremely hard to know how to select a bunch of units because you can't drag a box over them. You can't, if you click one of them, it just selects one. So I still actually couldn't figure out how to do that. So there are these different categories. I mean, returning to mods, I don't know what mods I would actually want for these games. There's only one thing that I think would be good, and that would be if people release new soundtracks for them. So if Overclock Remix did a remix album of Streets of Rage 2, and every track was picked, by a good remixer, that would make me replay the game to listen to all of that music, if that was the only thing that was different. So there's things like that. I guess, there could be a case of someone coming up with a really interesting gameplay mod, that just, effectively a game that sort of uses all of the assets or the broad structure of the game and has something interesting there. That could be good. But
that's a great idea. I love your music idea. Calling these things mods, so it's in some ways a little overstepping. It's going to always be much more likely these will be asset swaps, you were talking about, than it will be any kind of code changes which will require real hacking into it. I think it's cool. People are doing whatever they can with their back catalogs to get attention. And that's fine. It doesn't offend me in any way. I think it's kind of cool that Sega are trying to do this. But I can't really... I think it's just like films. There are only a few things that you remember so fondly that you want to keep watching them over and over again. I don't really want to play a Mega Drive game that I've never heard of unless it really pushes my buttons. I don't know. Stream of consciousness from me.
Nintendo have announced the release date for its new console, the NX, in their financial results briefing. The plan is for a simultaneous global release on March 20th, 2017. The new Zelda game will also be released on the same day for both the NX and the Wii U. Finally, there will be no NX-related material presented at E3. Are you surprised to get a release date before any other information?
Yeah, although whenever you're surprised by something like that happening, it's always because an investor's report had to come out. So in some ways I'm not surprised. March 20th is my birthday. So it's like probably the least one of the consoles I'd like to see on my birthday, but never mind. I can pretend I'm 14 again and get given it for my birthday from my mum, although she wouldn't be able to work out how to get it. Never mind. Right. So the NXA, it's still like the most exciting storyline.
Yeah.
I still can't wait to see what they do. Every day that goes past, I feel like the percentage chance that I believe Nintendo will do something great is getting lower.
Yeah.
But they still have a chance to turn it around. We were talking about the AR stuff earlier. I mean, I just kind of think that the Wii one was so great and the Wii U was so terrible. And I know everyone likes the Wii U games. I know. I can't stop just thinking that the Wii was this really incredibly elegant, awesome system that had such nice synergy between everything about it. Like it was cool arcade games, great controller, everything just made sense. And the Wii U is like the opposite. The Wii U, Nintendo had to use every single bit of its magic to make games that could get past what the Wii U is like to become really playable, etc. So it's like an aesthetic concern more than anything else. But anytime they're making something cool, I'm gonna turn up and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I share your sentiment that I'm a bit concerned by this no details thing. Why? What's the play there? Like, why are you making that play? Because E3 now would be a great time for them to announce it properly and go, hey, this is what it is. Or maybe just tease it somewhat. I mean, I suppose they could still do that. But if you do that now, then you've got until March to release it. I don't know, man. I'm a bit suspicious of this. I don't think it's going to be that big of a thing if they're not gonna.
The biggest red flag in this whole announcement is that the new Zelda will be launching simultaneously on both the Wii U and the NX. Now, I know that doesn't mean that the NX can't be some crazy cloud-based ribbon toy if it can just share a game with the Wii U. I understand that. But that still, for me, is problematic. And also, I guess it's wrong to call it a lack of confidence. You can see why they want both, to be able to launch a Zelda game on the Wii U and make all the Wii U people happy, because make all of their customers angry if they don't do that. Obviously, they also want to have a Zelda game on the new NX. But, in trying to have their cake and eat it with that, I think they're, in some ways, getting the worst of both worlds as well. I mean, if I was going to get an NX, I'd be much more likely to if it had, like, a properly exclusive Zelda on launch. Not this, whatever it is, upscaled with a couple new mini-games version of the Zelda that's coming out on the Wii U.
Yeah, they've said it's a completely new concept. I really hope it is. That's what I hope. And I also hope they don't have another failure. I mean, 2 back-to-back console failures, I think, would be very, very damaging for them, especially because, financially, I think there have been some issues in the last few years. I wonder what that would look like if Nintendo sort of started to withdraw from the console market.
Yeah, and it's still a bit unclear what they're doing with the 3DS. Are they actually gonna unify these things with the NX? Which is probably a bad idea. I could see it happening. That would be kind of an interesting thing to do, at least. And the 3DS is so important to them, but that market is getting slowly eroded by mobile phones, sadly.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. And I guess we're selling stock in Nintendo right now, figuratively speaking. But I'm still really excited to see what they do.
A company in Japan has developed a special case for the PS Vita, which is designed to make using the device for remote play of PS4 games easier and more comfortable. The extra case has molding at the sides to make it feel more like a normal controller, and special capacitive triggers at the back to replicate the R2 and L2 buttons, which are normally emulated by touching the rear touchscreen. This looks like the kind of thing you like. Is it?
Well, it's really sad because the lack of those 4 extra buttons on the Vita really kills remote play. For me, it's not the lag, which is totally fine on some titles. Like, I could easily cope with it in Dark Souls, for instance. But having to use the rear touchscreen for anything useful is really bad. Yes. And the front touchscreen isn't that much better. So it's a pity because it's actually a feature that I think got closer to being really good than you would have expected. This gigantic plastic thing, I'm sure, is not going to solve the problem. But I just thought I'd use this to lament that issue with my favourite handheld console of all time.
Well, I mean, looking at this, though, it's got kind of big triggers on the back and extra shoulder buttons. Does that not solve the problem?
Maybe. I mean, maybe you could buy this for me for my birthday instead of an NX.
Yeah, I'm tempted actually. I could see this being interesting. I mean, yeah, it's too much hand juggling. Yeah, it is interesting that the main problem with remote play was actually the controller. I remember playing Diablo on the Vita in bed while my console was on downstairs, and it being really cool. So that's good. I mean, this just makes me sad about the Vita, though, because the golden age where everything was coming out on the PS4 and Vita, I believe Enter the Gungeon is not on the Vita. Is that correct? No,
I believe that's true, and I think that the Vita really is kind of entering its put out to pasture time now. There's still some stuff coming out, but it's it took a couple of years longer than we thought.
Yeah.
But I do think it's getting quite bad. They didn't even release the new MLB The Show game on it. And that's really? Like a Sony-owned property that they were keeping coming out on the Vita as a big part of the Vita's lineup. So I think the Vita's sort of slowly going downhill. And I guess, I mean, I would have said exactly the same thing after the PSP1, but I guess they're not going to do it again. I guess.
It's really sad because it's such a great platform. I mean, I wonder if there is actually space for like a niche handheld then. Because Sony probably won't do it again. It certainly sold well enough for a company who was not as invested as Sony were in it to make a lot of money from it. Maybe there is a space there.
I think there's a space, and I certainly don't feel like new mobile phone developments are eroding the advantages of having a properly designed controller that has a screen in the middle that I can take everywhere.
Yeah.
But maybe Microsoft will do it next.
Right.
They haven't done anything weird in the hardware space for at least 10 minutes.
If somebody could get traction and support for a phone case you could make a phone case that basically makes your phone into a Vita. If you have a massive phone like me,
I mean,
I don't think that's insurmountable.
You know, that's got to logically be true, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think that it's probably a little hard to make that for a decent price without it also being sort of plasticky.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be mass market enough. But you know, if they did that properly, that would be good. You know, again, it's nice to have the full operating system revolving around games. It is nice, you know, Android, I love Android, but obviously it's always going to have some hitching problems. Again, they can't target the single hardware, which is really, really big deal. But we may just be past any possibility of that happening. So
Yeah. Intriguing. According to Riot Games, they were able to almost halve abusive incidents in League of Legends by showing offenders evidence of their misdeeds within 10 minutes of the event happening. A researcher from MIT has written a paper on the subject, which was recently published in Nature. This sounds great. Do you think it's going to solve a lot of griefing problems in other games?
Well, I mean, I think it makes complete sense. I think that only a very small number of people, you know, really have the kind of social problems, societal problems that they don't care about being reprimanded for their actions, like, you know, swearing at people who've missed a goal in Rocket League, something like that. And I think coming up with a little box that sounds like a teacher telling you off is a great way of immediately reinforcing that you shouldn't do that. And obviously waiting 2 hours or sending someone an email the next day is going to be much, much, much less impactful than getting a little message box, even at the end of the match. So yes, I think this is a good idea. Yes, this is something that everyone else should do. And I think that it's not just stuff like this. I think in general people are slowly getting the idea that what they type into the chat box in an online game is not sort of in the privacy of their own home, that they have to be somewhat socially viable while they're doing that. So I think we are generally getting better at doing it. I think there'll start to be education in school for children between the ages of 9 and 13, explaining them in the way that I was told, that I couldn't send a threatening letter to someone in a very specific educational class that we all took at my school. People will have the same kind of thing for internet behaviour. So I think this stuff is just going to get broadly a lot better. It's got a lot better, and it's going to get even better.
That's interesting. I don't know if I think it's got better. I don't know if I think that. I mean, I suppose it's got better in certain games. I think it gets better within the context of certain games when developers do things. I'm not sure I think it's got better across all games.
Okay.
You know, over the last few years. I mean, I'd be interested to see sort of evidence for that either way. I don't have any on my side.
No, I just have casual evidence. I don't have anything concrete. It was just my impression that stuff like XBLA, etc., was starting to bring out bans more often, and people were taking it seriously. But maybe I'm wrong. Right,
you start to see... Yeah, I mean, I think we can definitely agree that you've seen more proactive developer attempts, and Riot are sort of among the best, I think. Yeah, this is a really good idea. I think if you want to change someone's behaviour, you generally have to address it sort of at the time it's happening, and not necessarily sort of a long time afterwards, especially if it's kind of a negative stimulus, which I guess this is, you know, saying, oh, you shouldn't do this. I mean, Nintendo's thing in Smash, where it makes you, it causes you like a real problem if you quit in a match. You have to wait to log back on. I don't find that stops me quitting in matches when I'm really angry. I just find it annoys me.
I wasn't really bringing rage quitting into this. Maybe I should have been.
Okay.
I was only really thinking about abusive behavior and sort of and bad behavior within the game. I apologise. With rage quitting, I do think that's sort of a massive issue that's for me sort of quite conceptually different, because you do have the freedom to leave a match, obviously, and I think it's a lot harder to be sort of guilt tripped on that one than it is if you've just been overly rude to someone, for instance.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I was kind of using that as a systemic example, but I think it's certainly qualitatively different, to being insulting in chat, say. So yeah, sure, that's fine. Like being insulting in chat is definitely something that's much more preventable with education, I think, probably.
Yeah, I think rage quitting is a very, very hard problem. I mean, it's plagued Street Fighter V. I know that.
Yeah.
And the first thing you've got to do, obviously something that we kind of have had issues with people abandoning games. You've got to make sure that you punish the people in terms of leaderboards. That's the first thing you've got to do.
Yeah.
It took us long enough to do that, but we now do that. We probably don't do that fast enough.
Yeah.
I think that's a very, very tough issue. I mean, with a Street Fighter, I don't know how long a Street Fighter 5 match is. I mean, it's probably not more than a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Rocket League is, it's 5 minutes default for Rocket League.
Right.
I think 3 or 5, and that can be a long time. Like if I just get in a really bad mood and I've just let in 2 goals,
Yeah.
I can want to quit. But yeah,
Rocket League, the punishment stuff seems to work quite well for that. But I guess it's similar to the Smash stuff. Anyway, yeah, abuse. It's good that they found a way of solving this, and figuring out something that has a sort of a good psychological basis and then applying it very directly is good. I think immediacy is really important for this stuff. And if you can do things in your game sort of immediately to confront and arrest the behavior sort of as it's happening almost, then that's good.
yeah.
Steam user reviews have been changed, so they're more heavily weighted towards the last 30 days. Are user reviews ever useful?
Yeah, I don't know about changed. They've added another way of showing them. So you now see 2 different ratings. You see recent and overall. So they've literally added one other thing, as much as I understand it, and they're both at equal prominence, pretty much. You definitely see both these things. I think that having both those is good. Obviously, there are some games which have a bad beta or a very bad launch, and then they actually fix all the problems, and then they get overwhelmingly positive recent reviews, and that's good. And of course, you want to reward developers for doing that. So I think, in general, I'm a big fan of this change. I kind of vaguely appreciate Steam reviews. I found them to be reasonably correlating with what I've heard or what I've experienced with games. Am I way off on that?
No, I think they're good. I mean, my only concern, sort of from a development standpoint, is that you do get a lot of crap in negative reviews. Just ill-informed idiocy, and the idea that someone would go through negative reviews and sort of really take them literally is upsetting. But then you have that problem with Amazon product reviews and so on as well. Generally, I don't really like user reviews that much. I feel like they sort of skew towards people's individual weird predilections and experiences, and they're not sort of very useful in general. But if Valve are finding a way to present them better, then that's good, I suppose.
I tend to only use them when I'm really taking a punt on an early access game.
Right.
And I'm not generally someone who would be using these very much in general, just like you. But I will, sometimes that will be the tiebreaker about whether I buy something I've heard nothing about, there's no coverage on of any kind, it's in early access, I kind of like some aspect of the concept that I've seen. And if it's got decent user reviews, that can push me over the edge. And I don't pay attention any of the rest of the time, because if I'm going to buy something, I either know I'm going to buy it, or I'll have looked at PC Gamer Review or the RPS review. So I'm kind of cool with that. That's a little similar to, with Amazon stuff, it's so much about seller ratings, which I know is completely different. And that actually is important, I think. But, if you're not doing enough research if the pair of headphones that you're about to buy, you're looking at the Amazon reviews of, really. Because I think you'd want to read 2 or 3 professional reviews from hardware websites, I guess.
I think there's a difficult issue with some Amazon items where there aren't sites that review them. Like
Yeah,
if
sure.
it's some weird component or something, and then you've got one person saying, this does not work, 1 star, and someone else saying, this is great, 5 stars. In that situation, that just annoys me massively, because if I buy it and it doesn't work, I'm like, I should listen to that guy who said it doesn't work. So I hate that hanging over me, and there should just be official review sites for everything.
Sure, yeah.
That's enough of that. No Magic Corner this week. Hopefully that will return in future. But we do have the film and television lounge area, which we'll try and slip in gracefully before you have to depart for things that are much more important than this podcast. I want to talk about Better Call Saul Season 2, because that's now finished. If you haven't watched it, this will probably be very spoiler heavy, so I'd recommend skipping this section if at all possible. In fact, you probably want to go, so we'll see you next time. Yes, we both didn't like this season at all, really, I think. Very much, I suppose. Very much.
Yeah, pretty much. But I liked it a lot less after the finale was basically a cliffhanger for the most annoying storyline ever, as opposed to just ending it. I would have been all right with the season, I think, just about, if they just finished that stupid storyline. It was okay as the base of the second series, but the idea that now I have to sit through series 3 being still about this bloody thing between him and his brother, no.
Well, yeah, I mean, the final scene and sort of everything, I just found that incredibly predictable. Like, I just, as soon as that scene started happening, I thought, oh, it's probably going to be this thing, that he's baited him into doing this for that reason. And I feel like you, that has gone back and forwards too many times. It's become a bit stuck on that as an idea. I thought it was interesting bringing them into direct conflict, sort of as they did at the start of the season. But now it's become a bit repetitive, and I think that's the problem. In Breaking Bad, you had basically the introduction of sort of a new setup or a new character every season, and they haven't, I don't know why, but they haven't done that in Better Call Saul season 2. There's no new characters that came in this season to change up the situation, and that's a really big problem in these sort of, as you very well defined it, it's a character having a plan, an outrageous plan, and then doing it and it working and them dealing with the consequences. So you need new structures for them to plan around.
Yeah, it's just, I enjoyed, maybe half the episodes quite a lot and half the episodes all right. I probably didn't find it as boring as sort of, end of season 2, mid season 3 of Breaking Bad. But, that's okay. That was part of a massive, long, great show. I was just so depressed by the idea that there wasn't going to be something different in the third series. This season, I think, was quite a lot different to the first season for me. Yeah. And I was kind of just excited about series 3 being different again. And I felt that the finale, and maybe they'll just get rid of it in episode 1, and that's fine. But I felt the finale made me feel much less confident that was going to be the case.
Yeah, the sentiment with the writers seems to be that they have a lot, they had a lot more they wanted to explore with Jimmy and Chuck, and they actually didn't. They didn't have more things to explore. They didn't really add any nuance to it, apart from, the section where it kind of shows what he did with their father and the fact that he was, massively awful to their family when he grew up. But I feel like you could have dealt with that very well in a single episode or maybe 2 episodes. Also, with Kim, I think, being one of the most interesting characters in the show, she has some plot lines in this that just sort of evaporate, and you don't really get to see her do anything. She doesn't really do anything interesting. She hasn't changed particularly anything by the end of the season, so it's too static.
Yeah, she's just an adjunct to him and his development, I think, now, which is problematic. But yeah,
a shame.
Now I'm gonna leave the podcast now.
Right.
Assuming that you're happy to deal with the listener question section on your own.
Well, the listener question section is something of a sort of toxic dustbin fire this week. So yes, I think that's probably best dealt with on my own. So you go and do the rest of the things that you do in your life, and I'll see you next week.
Yes, lovely to have all of your listeners, and we will be back next week. Goodbye.
Right, as Ian heads off, we're going to head into the games that were released this week in 2006, thanks to Eurogamer and producer Jimmy. And I haven't done any research on these, so you'll have to join me for a bit of a stealth Google, or a not-so-stealth Google. So we start on the 4th of May, 2006, with a game called Bliss Island on the PC. So I'm just going to put that into Google here while you hang out. So Bliss Island is a puzzle game developed by Pom Pom, released by Codemasters for the PC and the PSP. It looks very strange indeed. I can see a sort of blue, weird, upside-down monster with a big arrow sticking out of it, and some tiles and so on. And I'm really not clear on what that is at all. On the 5th of May, we have Pac-Man World 3 on the Xbox, PS2, and DS. Wouldn't be this segment without a Pac-Man game. Ape Escape 3 on the PS2 and Ape Escape P on the PSP. I'm sure that was a hilarious joke at the time. Me and My Katamari on the PSP. Now, I'm not sure exactly which one of the Katamaris this was. I suspect this was not... it was kind of mildly well rated. It was the first Katamari game on a portable system, which is somewhat interesting. I'm going to look at some screenshots of this. There's a picture of a Katamari and a cow looking sort of slightly quizzically at it. Yeah, the Katamari games, I mean, I think I preferred Nobby Nobby Boy to the Katamari games, but then I wasn't around sort of for the initial Katamari stuff. Metroid Prime Hunters on the DS, I believe some people enjoyed this. I certainly was not one of them. I'm not a big Metroid Prime fan at all. But yeah, doing an FPS on the DS, I think, was a bold move. Rainbow Islands Revolution on the DS. Rainbow Islands has a very sort of specific place in my nostalgia, because I remember going into a computer game shop as a small child and seeing it running on some old computer, and just the colors were amazing. The little character in the crazy rainbows and the baddies. I remember watching some other kid play it for a really, really long time. That was my version of Twitch when I grew up, was going into game stores and watching other children play video games. But Rainbow Islands, I feel, is something that could come back. We've seen a lot of side-scrolling retro platformers, but I'd actually like to see some more static screen ones, like kind of Bubble Bobble or Rainbow Islands. Would be really, really interesting if an indie made a good version of that. And as I alluded to previously, an indie Bomberman would be excellent. Right, so that's enough of that. We'll catapult ourselves back to the present day now with the top 10 UK Steam games. And at number 11, it's Rust. Number 10, it's the No Man's Sky pre-order. It's nearly time for that to unleash itself on the world. Should be interesting. Warhammer 40k Dawn of War 2 Grand Master Collection at 75% off. Of course, Dawn of War 3 just been announced. Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga, 75% off, number 8. Doom, number 7, pre-order, excited about that. Stellaris, number 6, pre-order, excited about that too. I shall definitely be checking that out. Good luck to Paradox on that one, not that they need it. Dark Souls 3 at 5. I keep thinking I should get into Dark Souls. I only own Bloodborne, and I can't make myself play that. Battleborn at 4 and Battleborn at 3. There's some kind of Steam error there. That's why we included Rust at number 11. But yes, everyone's into the Battleborns. Total War Warhammer pre-order at number 2. Again, like really big success, sort of combining those bizarre franchises. Nice work, Sega, on that one. Star Wars Collection, 75% off at number 1. I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? That's enough of that. Now, as I referred to earlier, the toxic dustbin fire of your listener questions. So first we're going to go through a raft of questions which I'm not going to answer. Bob Marathi asks, yes, what day is it today? Irregular Dave asks, are you okay, hun? Matt Gamble asks, what day is it? Should I be with it or not? Retro Remake asks, what's that famous phrase people use on Star Wars Day to acknowledge the day itself? IO Dinosaur asks, when is the day announced for Smash Brothers? Higgy C asks, when is today's date announced for Be With You? Radian asks, what day is it? Storm Tamer asks, what date is it, Paul? Chaos Smurf just asks, why? Which I think is quite apposite. Purple Steve asks, who hurt you and why are you taking it out on the rest of us? And Binster UK asked, what is the most least shiny robot? So those are all the questions we're not answering out of the way. Now, on to your serious questions. Spilt Milk Studio asks, what's your favourite games industry event, news item, controversy, game release of the past 366 days precisely? Now, this is a question that probably needs some considerable thought. I have a few things for this, I think. I was thinking back to our discussion around the Tracer butt pose in Overwatch, because this as a story that brought everything, all the game's issues in the last few years to a head, the idea just being this animation of a character just sort of looking at the camera with the camera angled slightly towards her bottom, and that bringing everything together, that's kind of how I feel about the state of games discourse. So I think that that sums it up. There's a game that's been really bothering me, and it's a sort of site-specific installation game called Knife to Meet You, I believe, where basically it's predicated around a bunch of people sitting around, and then an actual knife on a little motor thing sweeps round and jabs you in the hand. Apparently not hard enough to break the skin, but hard enough to hurt you. And I've seen this game in operation, and it just looks like the most health and safety violating thing I've ever seen. I'm genuinely surprised any shows have allowed it to happen. I find it completely terrifying. And I keep thinking about it. I keep thinking about what would happen if it actually mauled someone, and would the creator be happy with that? And would it put in all these boring regulations that other installation games have to comply with. I don't know why I've been thinking about that so much, but I have. So I hope that answers the question. Nelson from Video Games in the Bible says, any outside-the-box marketing strategies you've seen work particularly well in the indie space that could be applied elsewhere? I definitely think what TinyBuild did with the Punch Club stuff on Twitch, doing novelty stuff with Twitch is really, really interesting. To clarify, if you didn't see that, they basically had a Twitch Plays thing set up, and then when Twitch managed to complete the game would be released, and it got them loads of attention, and I know loads of people are going to be doing something similar, but I think that worked really well. Finding a way to sort of non-cynically galvanize a behavior that a lot of people are doing anyway is a good marketing approach. Marketing stuff has to be things that people enjoy, that they like in and of themselves, and they sort of make them willing to engage with you in a sort of non-confrontational way. So I think that worked quite well. Any that have backfired horribly and could have been avoided relatively simply in hindsight, he asks. I'm trying to think about recent ones. Hitman putting fake blood under the door at EGX in the toilets was just incredibly unpleasant and harkened back to their sort of slightly offensive, pictures of dead bodies in magazine adverts. I think the sort of edgy, is it good taste or not stuff in advertising, it really just is pathetic. People get offended by the slightest thing these days, so you trying to push the window of people being offended in your marketing, I really feel like that's an outdated strategy. It feels very 90s, very old school industry to me to do stuff like that. So I think not being crass in your marketing is pretty wise generally. Just having, if you're going to do something that's predicated on humor, make sure it's not just you and your boring friends who are laughing at it, and make sure that you are using humor that is appropriate within the context that you're aiming it at, I guess. Otherwise it can go very wrong and you can't defend it. You won't have other people who are serious about humor defending you because it's not going to be a good joke. So it's difficult. It's difficult to manage that balance of comedy. And also I feel like marketing is a very difficult place for comedy that has a lot of integrity. It can be done. You had some genuinely funny adverts and things in the past, but if you're doing that, you have to go for the joke over representing the product. Obviously that can be dangerous in the context of marketing, and the joke has to be good. Hamster asks, with people complaining about Doom, do you think there's a market for a new Quake despite Quake Live and Reflex not doing so well? Yeah, I absolutely do, but I think it needs to focus more on single player. I played Strafe recently at PAX East, which is a very cool game, really, really nice. Devolver, again, having outdone themselves massively. But what I wanted from it was kind of longer level content. I wanted something that was a bigger single player experience that let me experience these places, not just this sort of meta game of very quickly going after ammo and so on. And also they have this sort of fast paced sort of semi-roguelike structure with crafting and so on. And I felt that wasn't really what I wanted from the game. So I do think there's a market for a classic FPS, but it really has to leverage that level content. It really has to kind of draw you in. And I would say story. Quake obviously didn't have a linear narrative, and it weren't into that kind of thing. John Carmack famously not so. But the story that was told through the atmosphere, through the really weird sort of techno Lovecraftian, heavy metal sort of setting, I really like that. So a game that is using that technology and has that look, but doesn't copy the setting and the aesthetic, that has something really original to say in terms of its concept, in terms of its sort of artistic motivations, I think could be really good. Shibio Acheronus asks, why can't I pronounce that name today? I don't know. What is your favourite game ever, and what is the best game ever? Is it the same, or do you have different standards? Again, one that I should probably have put more thought into. I think I'd probably have to stick with Deus Ex for favourite game ever. It does have a lot of problems, though. So this question over sort of best game ever, I don't think it's the platonic ideal of what a computer game should be. I think, especially now, there was some sort of jankiness to it that was a bit off-putting. The combat and the way characters sort of seem to slide around and feel very rigid in Deus Ex, I think was something that always irritated me. Sometimes the combat didn't really feel that satisfying. So I definitely think it had some negative points. Obviously, some of the story is pretty silly as well, to be honest. Some of the dialogue's pretty silly. I could have been tightened up a bit, I think. But it's still probably my favourite game ever, just for the atmosphere, the incredible flexibility of the levels, the level design, and the overall narrative being so compelling. The best game ever is a very, very, very difficult question. I would definitely put a case for that either being StarCraft or Street Fighter 2, probably. Just the sheer elegance of the design there is somewhat unmatched. I almost feel like the best game ever has to be a multiplayer game. Maybe something seminal like, the first Mario Brothers, in terms of drawing people in to gaming and defining so much of what gaming is, could be the best game ever. So yeah, I think there's an interesting distinction to be made there. Trent de Rock asked, will there be co-op asynchronous or no in FS2? What about shared factions, friendly rivalries, and knife fights in phone booths? We want to do some co-op stuff. I certainly want to do some co-op stuff. Whether it will be there from day one, I don't know. It's sort of largely up to Ian, and he's gone now, so you'll have to ask him. There won't be co-op stuff on the map. The map is a single-player game currently, and it's going to be very hard to implement any kind of multiplayer, be it co-op or whatever, on that situationally. But then what we want to do with FS2 is build it, put it out there, see what people want, see what the right things are to do with it. So anything is possible. Right, that's enough of that. Thank you very much indeed for your questions and for listening to the show. We're sorry we haven't been around much. I've been traveling an enormous amount to various different events. And also, I have some health issues to deal with occasionally. That means that doing things on a regular basis is a little bit hard. So I'm sorry about all of that. But we hope to come back very soon. We'll be back next week with a fuller, more contemporary show. So until then, goodbye.
That's it, children. Time for bed. Don't forget to pay us a visit at www.visitingthevillage.com.